Soil is alive, and just like us, if it goes long enough without food, it'll eat itself. Welcome back, casual gardeners. With the coming of the grasshopper plague and their tendency to really enjoy eating all of the things I normally would have planted in the fall, I've decided that I am going to go with a different plan. So what I'm going to be doing this year, instead of planting my typical fall crops, like trying to get another round of lettuce and stuff like that, is I'm going to be planting field peas all over the place. Field peas are a winter-killed cover crop, which means that the first hard frost is going to take care of these for me. They don't have a lot of food value for me, or even for pollinators, but they are going to feed my soil. And if I wanted to, I could still get some food value out of these. You can pick the shoots and they taste just like peas. The vegetable itself is edible, it's just not my favorite. There are lots of different ways that we can feed our soil, and the most common way we feed our soil is cultivation. We think about gardening in kind of an extractive sense. We're planting plants and using them to get food out of our soil. But that's not actually necessarily the whole story. Every plant that grows in the soil is contributing to the health of the soil it's growing in. Root exudates are excreted by the roots of the plant into the soil, and they are going to encourage fungal and bacterial life in your soil. The presence of your roots in the soil is also, as they die and decompose, providing lots of nutrition for decomposers and detritivores. Those are going to move through your soil, open it up and till it for you, and provide fertility for the plants that you plant later on. So just the simple act of growing something in your soil is actually great for soil health. Another popular way to feed the soil is compost. Compost is one of my favorite ways to feed the soil. It adds carbon to the soil along with a small amount of other nutrients. You can use your compost as a mulch, and if you do that, you are encouraging bacteria, fungi, and detritivores to build up populations in your soil and do some work for you. Another way we feed our soil is seasonal crop rotation and interplanting. So you're just rotating through different crops throughout a single season, and by interplanting, all that means is that you're planting your next crop before your first crop has finished. So a good example of intercropping is going to be what I'm going to do when I plant my garlic. Because in a month, I'm going to be planting garlic, and you can bet your buns my garlic is going to go in where I've planted field peas, because I'm planting field peas everywhere. But that doesn't matter. I'll just plant my garlic in there too. And the field peas are going to finish before my garlic really gets started. Cover cropping is not always necessary in gardens, but it is another way we can feed our soil. So cover cropping is just another way that we constantly have something growing in that soil. If nothing's growing in the soil, it is starving. In farming, cover cropping allows the farmer to keep the soil fed during fallow seasons. So if you're a tomato farmer, you're mostly growing tomatoes. There's going to be earlier in the season, in the early part of the spring when it's too cold to plant tomatoes, but maybe you can do a spring cover crop, or you can do a winter cover crop and till it in the spring. And that means that you're going to have those months when you're not growing your main crop, but there's still something growing in that soil and feeding it. And when we cover crop, we can choose between different kinds of cover crops. We can choose to grow nitrogen fixing crops like these field peas, or we can grow green manures. And they do work differently, and they're both really great. You do whichever one makes you happiest. A nitrogen fixing cover crop is, just like the name implies, it's going to add nitrogen to your soil. While a green manure doesn't add any nutrients to the soil, it's mostly taking nutrients from the soil as it grows. those nutrients are going to be locked up in the green manure, which means that when you cut it and drop it on the soil to rot, or when you till it in, all those nutrients are going to go back into the soil, and they're going to be more available to future plants than they would have been if you hadn't had that cover crop there at all. So you can see right now that I'm not planting into a clean bed. And that's because it's not important that I do so. The plant material that's here is going to be allowed to break down and re-enter the soil and feed it. So I'm not really interested in cleaning this soil. There's no material benefit to having clean soil. So what do I get out of feeding my soil? I've gone over the ways that you can feed your soil. What's in it for me, and by extension for you? What immediately comes to mind is that all of that detritivore and decomposer activity in the soil that is fostered by keeping it constantly fed means that your soil is going to be looser. You're going to have better tilth without tilling. So you can either reduce the amount of tilling that you do, or you can eliminate tilling from your gardening routine altogether, and you'll still have really workable soil. Another benefit is that all of this cycling of nutrients will make sure that those nutrients remain available for your plants a lot longer. And that means that less fertilizer will go a lot further for you. You don't have to add as much nutrition to your soil when it's available longer. Nitrogen fixers, like these field peas I'm planting today, are going to add nitrogen to your soil. That cuts down some more on the fertility that you need to add yourself. And then by fostering that nutrient cycling, the nitrogen hangs around longer. By constantly feeding my soil, I don't have really ever any need to rejuvenate my soil. There's nothing I need to do to make my soil ready to grow, because as long as I'm keeping it fed, it's always ready to grow. The only reason you would ever have to rejuvenate your soil is if you starved it. So, for instance, if you're over-reliant on chemical fertilizers and you don't add enough carbon to your soil along with your fertility regimen, that's when you'll need to rejuvenate your soil, because you're taking out more carbon than you're adding and you're starving it. So as long as you're feeding your soil, you're by definition, you're not starving it, and you will never need to rejuvenate it. Let me know in the comments if you have a favorite cover crop or a favorite method for feeding your soil. If you're still watching here at the end of the video, that means you might have liked it. So hit the like button, consider hitting the subscribe button so that you can see more of my videos as they come out. If you ding the little bell, you get notifications when I post a new video. As always, thank you for joining me here in my garden, and I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.